Hello and welcome back to the podcast, No Longer Legally Detained, about life after the psych ward. How do you navigate being an adult when you never expected to be one? Hello, it's Hannah and welcome back. Really sorry that there wasn't an episode last week. Life was lifing, life was a lot, and yeah, I went back to my grand's house for a bit. It was an experience as always. And yeah, I didn't have any of my equipment with me, but also was kind of having a bit of a break. But yeah, we're back this week and we're very like fruit themed. I got this dress from TK Maxx and I got it because I've wanted a white dress forever, and Beverly, my mom, is like so anti white clothes. She says I'm too pale, but seeing as I don't live there anymore, I thought, Feral, let's get a white. So yeah, I've got a berry dress on, and seeing as last episode I had the pineapple, I thought let's like have a Jellycat themed for every episode. So if you're watching on YouTube, you will see that I have my white rabbit Jellycat, which has got like the strawberry berry ears. So yeah, very cute. But hello, welcome back. Long time no chat. How are you? How you doing? How's life treating you? How is life treating me? Well, it has been a lot. For anyone who follows me on socials, if you don't, I suggest you do, at Legally Detained or the podcast social NLLD the podcast. Yeah, you'll have seen that things hit a bit of a rough point. Yeah, it was like processing. And I haven't got a script today, which is feral, but I'm trying, well, because I do actually know what I want to talk about. So, and it's more of like a chill episode. Plus, I also just need to film it. So there's like a lot of reasons. But yeah, I had an incident that happened in March, and kind of since then, my life kind of just spiraled out of control. And I didn't necessarily realize / want to admit maybe how tricky things were. So yeah, it was all a bit of a challenge, but we reset, we came back, and we are ready to take on the world again. And also, I was looking at these because they're sat in front of me. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you will see I've made like these little like worry thumb things, and they're actually so good. Although some of mine, I've got like the thumb like indentations in of like your fingerprint, so they're not quite as smooth. But if you can see, if you're watching, that I've like put little holes in for the eyes, but I don't know whether like they look really weird. They look really weird. So I don't know whether like I should what I should do to like make them look less weird, basically. But these are actually like so life-changing. Really, really love. But that is not what today's episode is about. Today's episode is going to be talking about launching my ADHD challenge, which is coming this June. Obviously, this episode is going out on Sunday, the 1st of June, which is when I'm starting my kind of ADHD month. So let me just get up my Instagram, because I'm otherwise going to completely like butcher what I'm about to say. Not even gone on the socials this morning. But yeah, I am going to be dancing for ADHD. Gosh, she's forgotten how to speak. So what am I doing? Why am I doing it? That's kind of be what today's episode is going to be about. Also kind of a bit about ADHD, how it affects me, why I'm so passionate about it. Just basically an ADHD chat, really. So yeah, stay tuned, enjoy, and let's get into the episode. Boom. So I am an ADHD UK ambassador, and part of my role of that is trying to support and help fundraise for the charity. And like I've worked for like a lot of different charities and like volunteered for a lot of different charities. And kind of recently my engagement with many of the charities has like maybe not been as big because of other things that have been going on in my life. But I think having like started my degree and like being more back into the real world, I have again like come into contact with there's still the misunderstanding of like neurodivergent conditions. Obviously, like we all knew that I was late diagnosed. So I was diagnosed autistic in 2020 when I was 19, and I was diagnosed as ADHD in 2023 at the age of 23. So and then I got on my medication in like the September of 2023, and it really did change my life. Like I'm obviously, it's very individual, very like specific to each person. But for me, ADHD medication was absolutely life-changing, and it saved my life. So I spent a long time in and out of hospital, as many of you might know. And when I first started the medication, it was, and obviously there was a lot of work, and it wasn't obviously just that. Like I did a lot of work, and it was, you know, finding out like that I am ADHD. I think it's really tricky because I was diagnosed as autistic, and when I was first diagnosed, well, first of all, I didn't even think I was. Then I was diagnosed and still then didn't really believe it. And then I kind of was around like a lot of the autistic community. Obviously, everyone's so different and unique. So even then, like, but I still just didn't feel like I fit like at all. And then I had this like psychology. I think I've spoken about this before on the podcast. But I had psychology and was an autism specialist, and it was him who was like, "Have you ever thought about the fact that you're like very ADHD and also PDA?" And it was like these different profiles of like ways to like look at my brain that really helped me. And like obviously labels and stuff, but they are such a controversial thing. But for me, like finding out that I am autistic and I am neurodivergent, that's the way that my brain works, was life saving and life changing. And if I hadn't got those, I wouldn't be here. Like I wouldn't still be alive. Like I know that for certain. So it's a really like double-edged sword. But actually, like I think the thing with labels and the thing with like diagnoses is that the purpose of them can sometimes be misunderstood. Obviously, like when it comes to like the medical like diagnostic, I'm not a doctor, like I'm not going to go into like any of that because it's not my place to say. But once you've like got a medical diagnosis or in that respect, that's one part of it. But like in terms of like self-identification, that's kind of what I want to speak about, like like how you identify and how you understand yourself. Like that is what I can talk about from my own experiences. I can't talk about like the medical, and I have obviously had my opinions and my perspectives on that, and that's not my place to say. But like in terms of this is my experience for me in terms of like learning what it meant to me. And obviously for you to learn what it means to you is individual, and you don't need that is valid in any respect, whether you have a diagnosis or you're self-diagnosed. And obviously diagnosis is definitely a privilege. And so yeah, kind of disclaimer out of the way, let's get into it. So yeah, when I kind of looked into the PDA profile, so pathological demand avoidance, or also known as pervasive drive for autonomy, is the profile of autism, although it's not necessarily diagnosable. And as like, this is what the psychologist said, he was like, you're not going to get diagnosed with it, but like it's just helpful to know. And I think that that's the biggest thing for me. And obviously like there's the aspect of like getting support and like support needs, all of that, which does require, rightly or wrongly, the need for a formal diagnosis. But like again, as I said, we're like kind of not, because it's very, very valid and important, but like, you know, we can't talk about everything in one go. It was like learning what it meant. So obviously like you can't be diagnosed with PDA in this country, as far as I'm aware. But like he was like, this is a really like interesting profile. And I do think that like you really, like a lot of the way you are like really reflects this profile. So like it'd be something to like look into and like find out about. And learning about PDA, learning about how like PDA brains kind of view the world and how they like experience life was really, really helpful. And it really has like changed how I perceive myself perceiving the world. And I think that's the biggest thing of like getting a diagnosis, like being this thing doesn't change who I am. I still am the same person I was before. For me, like things haven't got worse, they haven't got better, but what it has got better in terms of my life, because I can understand myself and be more like kind to how I am. And I think that like being autistic and ADHD are just they are who I am. And like I think that's a really like can be a really tricky kind of thing and like line to talk about, because I think a lot of people, you know, that doesn't invalidate the disabling nature of them, but like I wouldn't be me if I wasn't autistic and ADHD, because for me how I view like my neurodivergence is that it's the way that my brain like is wired, it's the way that my brain has been formed. That is, I have an autistic / PDA and ADHD brain. Like that's my brain, and those things aren't inherently negative or positive, they just are who I am. And obviously then I live in a world where it's a neurotypical kind of aimed world, so therefore like it is very disabling. But equally, being autistic and ADHD is inherently disabling in itself. And obviously like because people talk about like, and it is like it does affect every aspect of my life, it does make my life harder. If we lived in a different kind of world, would they still disable me? I've no idea. I can't say because I've never lived in that world. So yeah, but for me, like I also have complex PTSD, and I've struggled with like different mental health problems, and have had and do have other diagnosed mental health conditions. And I think that like for me, my brain isn't those things. Obviously when it comes to trauma, it's different, because obviously the trauma does affect your brain and it does change like the way your brain is, so therefore like it is a permanent thing. And like I think that's the difference for me, like obviously because I'm so like, you've got different things and like so complex, you know, inverted commas for those who are just listening, that it's really hard. You can't untangle the different parts of it. Like it is all just so intertwined, which is why like when people say like obviously when it comes to the traumatic experiences that I went through, if like, you know, and I hate the question like, if you could go back, would you change it? Well, obviously in terms of like, I don't want to go through abuse, but in terms of being autistic and ADHD, like obviously there were bits of it, like of having those things that made my life so much harder. And like obviously if I'd been born neurotypical, my life would have been different. Absolutely. But I wouldn't have been me, I'd have been a different person. So like I don't really know why I'm going on like a complete tangent and ramble about like autism and ADHD, but I just kind of do feel so passionately about the fact that like autism and ADHD specifically, like moving the trauma to the side, are who I am, and like that has positives and negatives, just as anybody's brain has positives and negatives. So yeah, so I'm an ADHD UK ambassador, and there's obviously a lot of like at the moment conversation about autism, ADHD, like overdiagnosis, underdiagnosis, like we're all autistic and ADHD, none of us are autistic and ADHD, we're all snowflakes, we're all this, we're all that, and I think that like it's such a misunderstood and misconstrued kind of conversation. And again, I'm not a doctor, not a, you know, but for me, I think there's lots of reasons, like I personally believe, like there's the reason more people are being identified. And like that again is not for today's episode, but what I do want to talk about is that when you get a diagnosis, for anyone who is listening to this who has a diagnosis, they will know that that diagnosis, although as I say, and I will stand by the fact that it did save my life, that doesn't change who they, like it doesn't make life easier, it doesn't make life harder, and actually often can be both of those things. But the diagnosis and the label is only a tiny part. It's, you know, and again, not to like dismiss how hard it is to get that part, because believe me, I know how hard it is to get that part. But for me, the change came not from the piece of paper in front of me. Obviously, that was that did help, and like that was the belief, because when I had that piece of paper, then I could, although to begin with I didn't necessarily believe it, but like I do get that like if I hadn't got a formal diagnosis, I would have struggled for myself. I can do it in other people, but for me, it's always that thing of like we're much harsher on ourselves, aren't we? That then I like could allow myself to maybe believe this thing, and then could be kinder to myself. That aside, the biggest thing for me was finding out what those things meant to me. And obviously, like, there is the diagnostic criteria. And again, I'm not talking about that today. But then I kind of like, I took that. But then, like, what does that mean to me? Because just because you have a condition, and even if it's diagnosed, doesn't mean that, like, you, gosh, kicking things. It doesn't mean that, like, it's not like a magic overnight wand or whatever. Like, it does take time. And for me, I used creativity. Creativity was like the tool I used to help and learn to like discover who I was and like who I am and like what it means to be me and what it means to like perceive and see the world from like my eyeballs. And that was something that a journey that I set out that I didn't even realize I was doing. I didn't like wake up one day and was like, right, I'm going to go and find out who I am. It was a slow process. Took for me like a lot of academic, like looking into things, and that's like how my brain works. And then like then it was kind of like then using creativity to kind of express and explore. Now, I didn't go out and set out to do this. It kind of happened, but I want to kind of share my story, as I think that like there is kind of this thing, and I'm sure a lot of people will relate to, like when you get that diagnosis, you like think, okay, so I've got this diagnosis, now what? And that really, like, I do think is such a massive thing. And like for me, I got my diagnosis and of like autism to begin with, and I still struggle with my mental health. Like I still was in and out of hospital, and it wasn't until I took that diagnosis and went, right, okay, so this is the diagnostic part of it, but what does actually that mean to me, that I could begin to actually make like steps into like living a life that was worth living, and like kind of finding out and unlearning a lot of things, but also discovering a lot of things. And like I think obviously like for me, I add in a lot of trauma, so that's kind of adds another aspect to it. But I've kind of, through this very long ramble, during April, which was Autism Acceptance Month, I did some journal prompts over on the Mighty Creatives social media all about autism, and I decided that since I needed to launch this challenge because I wanted to obviously raise money for ADHD UK. It's kind of also part of my role as an ambassador, and also kind of I'm doing a show about autism. And so I felt like for me, often for a very long time, I used to like, whenever people like asked me like what I struggled with, I always be like, oh, I'm autistic. Sorry, I just hit the microphone, so that might have affected the audio. I always say like, I'm autistic, I struggle because I'm autistic. And actually, for me, that does not actually do it justice. It doesn't paint the picture of who I am, and like that's not to down cry autism. It's a different thing. And like I think having like now learned a lot more, like I am not your stereotypically autistic. And again, like firstly, to really clarify, like stereotypes are really damaging, and that we shouldn't. Everyone is unique and individual. Like I can't stress that enough. But like obviously, even within that, like because obviously autistic traits are human traits, so therefore we all have them. But just because we all have them doesn't mean we're all autistic. And like I say, I am autistic, but the way my autism presents isn't in necessarily like the way that even within the spectrum of autism. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm really having to justify because I don't want to like say the wrong thing. I'm hoping that it comes across like what I mean. And so I was like, you know what, like this is a great time to start my ADHD challenge, raise money and raise awareness, especially because the medication like issues that are happening with ADHD and like the PIP stuff and all these things, and like really bring like awareness of this like neurotype. I think also because ADHD is viewed as like the more palatable version of autism and ADHD, and that's probably that's going to be like really controversial, but it's so interesting the amount of people who like are maybe who don't have learning disabilities basically, who are diagnosed ADHD and not autistic, and like how it's still, I really do believe it's still viewed as like a cooler, I don't know, like that's not really the right word, but like version of it, and it's like really bizarre. And I think that ADHD is so misunderstood. Like it's viewed as like on like two ends of the spectrum. Again, like it has the negative stereotypes just like autism does. Often it's like little boys who are just like really badly behaved and just run around and like scream. But then you've also got the part of like, oh no, ADHD just makes you really bubbly and really hyper, and like you get loads of things done and you're like really like creative and like wild. Actually, like while there are aspects of that are true in terms of like ADHD is a lot more than that, and it's a lot more than just having loads of energy and being like, and I think that is now the conversation I want to be having. I want to be speaking about the real like realities of having ADHD, impact that has. And I think like Chris Packham's done another documentary about like this time inside the ADHD brain, and I think like I only just started watching it because I applied to be on it and he didn't choose me, so I was a bit sorry about that, but we'll move on. Jokes. But yeah, I think that it is this like really, really misunderstood. And yeah, so it's something that I've not necessarily spoken as much about. It's something that like I am like now further on in my journey. And I suppose like when I started talking about autism was a couple of years into my autism journey, and now I'm going to be talking about my ADHD. And I think that like it is so misunderstood. And actually the impact of ADHD is mental and feral. And it's also that thing of like it does impact a lot, and like it's one of those things that it isn't, it's, and again, really unique, really individual. It isn't like how my ADHD affects me is not going to be the same as how anyone else's ADHD affects them. And obviously when you add it into intersectionalities and life experiences, again, it's all very different. But I do think it's a conversation that we need to and should be having. Yeah. So this June, I'm going to be doing 30 prompts, journaling prompts over on my Instagram, and might do it on TikTok as well. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I can like I've got enough executive functioning to be trying to do this. Like it's quite a challenge. And then I'm also going to be raising money for ADHD UK by doing a dance challenge. So I am a performing arts student. I'm absolutely like musical theatre is my love, my life, my passion. But I love all things creative. And it's, I think like since kind of for a long time, I love dance, and I have done bits of dance, obviously like starting late in dance in musical theatre, it's a feral experience, but I find picking up choreography so ridiculously hard. Like I can't, if someone like does something in front of me, I can't then translate that into my body and then retain it and remember it. Whereas if I choreograph something, it's fine. But again, like remembering it can be tricky, but like I have a vision inside my head of what I maybe want something to look like, but I really can't like take what someone else has done and put it into like myself. And I really find it hard to remember. And a lot of that is linked to like being neurodivergent. Obviously, again, does affect some people, doesn't affect others. And like for some people, I know like I have a friend who's ADHD and they choreography really, really easy. And actually that's their like thing that they've actually, their ADHD makes it easier for them to like learn it. And like again, that's why it's so like different and unique for everybody. But I have missed dance, and I've missed like, and I also want to challenge myself because I know that pickup, although it's something that I'm always probably going to struggle with, it is something that you can improve. Like, you can practice does improve it, and like muscle memory and like just training your brain to like improve like that ability to do that. So yeah, and why not learn a short little dance section every day in June? So that's what I'm going to be doing. So you can follow along. It'd be great to anyone to join me would be amazing. I was looking at my Instagram this morning actually, and like some people were like saying that they were going to join. So I don't know whether people want me to share like in the morning what song I'm going to be working on, or like everyone to do different ones. Obviously, it's totally fine. I'm going to be posting, hopefully. I should be, because that's part of the challenge, Hannah. Come on, you can do it. So yeah, so it's going to be like 3 aspects really to like June: the journal prompts, the dance challenge, and then the education of like, I say education very like formally, but like showing some of my lived experience, sharing like some like facts and figures, and just kind of like being very hyper aware of ADHD, I guess, really, and just like sharing kind of a bit about it. And I think that it's always it's always hard because these things are so personal and unique. But if no one talks about them, then we end up like in this situation where like you just don't know, and like you can feel really alone and isolated. And the statistics of like, especially there's a lot of statistics at the moment around like autism and suicide, and it's something that like I'm really, really, really passionate about. And the statistics around ADHD and suicide are also really bad. And I think that there is such a loneliness and and it brings up different challenges, like in relation to like both of the two things. But I think it's just having these conversations and being open, and also that thing of like, I often really get scared about talking about these things because it is so individual and unique. And like, I might share my experience, and I've done this in the past. Like, I've shared something and then people go, well, I don't agree with, like, I don't relate to that. And it's really hard because then I end up feeling like I'm just like going around in circles trying to like justify like, I don't think everyone thinks that. Ultimately, we can't like impact what other people think of like your intentions, and my intentions are purely that it is so unique, individual, different. Like, I could say some things about my experience of being autistic ADHD and having complex PTSD, and you could have exactly the same 3 diagnoses and have the complete opposite experience. But both of those experiences are valid, and actually both of those voices are vital, because if we have the shared experience of like being able to share all these different experiences, then people are able to, first of all, like people who have these things are able to go, oh, so maybe I am valid, because, or maybe I do have like, and I have aspects of all these different people. And like, I think the same with like tips and advice. Like, I would never give advice because I'm not the doctor. I'm not any way qualified. And also, actually, as individuals, we are the most qualified on our own lives. But what I have found so useful is like hearing other people's experiences and how they have navigated those, and then taking them and then changing and applying them to my own life. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway that I've had in my journey of like, it's listening and hearing other people's experiences, but then not applying those in like a really binary way, because I'm not them, but there are aspects of those things that I can then take and go, right, like, and that's why I do think that like discovering who you are and your identity allows you to then nitpick these other people's ideas, other people's experiences, but then apply them in a way and shape them into your own experiences in your own life. And like, that's kind of the biggest steps that I've ever made in like all aspects of kind of like recovery, and in terms of like just like navigating adult life, has been when I've been able to kind of do my own work personally on myself, also listen and hear other people's experiences, and kind of like take that, mold it, and then put it onto myself in a way that works for me. And I suppose that's kind of what I want to speak about this month in terms of ADHD. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. Just a whole lot of conversations about ADHD, which is very ADHD. But I'm really excited to kind of get back into the swing of things. Really also hoping that like in this whole like series that I'm doing, that I will be able to help myself in terms of my executive functioning skills, because they are feral. They are so bad, like so bad right now. And just like remember that like despite everything, and despite maybe certain opinions and perspectives, that like I am me, and that is valid and worth it as who I am. And like, I think there's a big part of ADHD in terms of like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which obviously isn't a diagnosis, but again is a massive part that plays in my life. And I do think that like being misunderstood as an ADHD person is huge, and that definitely for me links into my trauma as well, and something I will be talking about. Like, and I think that kind of what happened in March really was obviously it triggered a lot of my trauma, but also like that thing of, I mean, really, I have to find the statistics of like ADHD people and how like many negative like things they've heard about themselves by the age of like 10. Like the statistic is mental. And I do think that that's like, it's just learning, just knowing about how your brain works doesn't change how your brain works, doesn't make it any easier in terms of like, it doesn't change your brain to be easier, but it does change your perspective to be kinder to yourself, and in some ways that can make things easier. And yeah, like it's a journey, and some days I'm like, whoa, love it, and some days I'm like, I can't do this, it's still too much. But that's kind of why I share. That's why I want to make, you know, these things, because I want to be kind of a voice that like the little Hannah could have done with, but also like hopefully just spread like awareness and like understanding, really. So yeah, so this month is going to be very ADHD focused for me. It's not like in terms of the month, like I'm doing the challenge for a month, so, and I'm going to do some journal prompts, but I also been thinking about doing a PDA, like pathological demand avoidant pervasive drive for autonomy, but journal prompts for a month, and awareness. I think that's something that I'd really like to do. And then also like maybe ARFID and complex PTSD like throughout the rest of this year. So do let me know if they are kind of topics you'd be interested in, and if there are any other topics that you'd be interested in, let me know. Obviously, in terms of like really deep diving, like I will only deep dive into the things that I have, because I think that, you know, there are lots of other people who have much better place to like talk about experiences that like they have. It's like, you know, I'm always willing to like wanting to listen and learn, but it's not my place to like talk about those things when there are so many others who do a much better job. So yeah, but yeah, so happy dancing. I hope everybody has a great month. I hope June is a good month to us all, and it will be ups and downs as always, but yeah, and let's dance, let's journal, let's create, let's live, survive, and you never know, maybe even thrive. So yeah, no, thank you so much for listening. As always, if you've got any episode suggestions, do let me know. Please follow along. Please follow the podcast. Please give me 5 stars. It means so much. It also helps the algorithm push out my podcast further to different people. You can catch me over on YouTube, which is just much this podcast literally like on YouTube, because can you imagine? Like, subscribe, follow the Instagrams, and yeah, just spread the ADHD love. And I hope everyone has a tolerable week. Take care, lots of love. Bye bye.